and it's one of my responsibilities to implement this, but particularly for independent consultants like yourself. So this is a program that has been deployed in a number of areas, and we can share some examples of that with you. But our thinking is very much on how this particular toolkit will be of value to you guys out there in the field dealing with a whole number of client issues. And the purpose of this session is to go one step beyond my phone conversation with you to actually give you a first-hand sight of what the app suite is about, how it works, and what can it do for you in terms of improving improving performance within a client and improving communications between the consultant and the client. So that's what we're about, optimizing performance, as it said, through zero-code smart apps. And we've put together a suite of apps that we believe will be of great value here to support the work that you already do. So like everything else, you might say, well, I'm doing bits and pieces of this already, or doing more than what we're sharing with you. I think the key thing here is the point of difference is the way in which it is done. It's obviously going to be web-based and online, which gives a number of advantages in terms of agility and flexibility in the way in which the tools are used. And that's what we want to give you a sight of here. We're going to go and spend time demonstrating that, but obviously questions will occur to you, and it's okay for you to interrupt and ask us questions. That's the whole value of having this session with you. And if anything isn't covered that you would like to see more of, we can perhaps sweep that up at the end of the session and make sure that we've addressed all of your concerns or questions on what you see. So without further ado, let me talk through what we consider to be the agenda for this actual session. Just talking through what would be valuable is for you just to see. I hope you can see now. We've put this up here, the agenda down the left-hand side. If you can't see it, obviously we're doing the welcome and intro piece here, and what we'd like to do then is give you a quick snapshot of what Softools is about as an organization, then spend time looking at the actual Refresh program. What's it about? Why is it important? How does it work? And how can we actually work with you to implement it? An overview of the four-stage process that underpins the entire Refresh program, because each of the four stages will have apps that activate it, and we want to share those with you. And then really bridge into, well, how do we get that used? We call it deployment. Once you have the app suite, how do you use it individually as a consultant? And or if you have a particular prospect in mind that maybe wants to do this themselves in terms of aligning everything that you're suggesting to their business processes, there are a number of options in the model to allow you to do that. So I think here you can maximize your leverage within a client or prospect by considering options. You're not alone here, as it were, and empowering the client is maybe sometimes a good way to go if there are a significant number of users that might be impacted. Then talk really about the value model. How do we get traction? How do we get stickiness in the deployment? What are the commercials relating to this, so that you have at your fingertips all the information you need to make a decision? What we'd like to hope is that if you are interested, you can maybe make it to the face-to-face session where we can go through a lot of these things in a bit more detail, but that's getting ahead of the game at this stage. And then the final wrap-up piece is, well, what do you want from us to facilitate your review? And we're going to suggest some next steps from our side. So that's the agenda, and what we're going to do now is move into
just got one or two challenges with our PowerPoint here. Just moving on to the next slide rather than the previous slide.
Technical glitch.
And I think I might even come out of the presentation view. It's just Okay, here we go. Great. Okay, so back to Andy here. And Christopher, I know you've got familiarity with the company in any case, but just give a few slides in terms of background. And after this call, we'll send through the PowerPoint pack that we're using here. And in fact, Bill's then got more information on the program itself. Feel free to jump in and ask any questions at any point in time. But just as a way of background, Softools was set up 18 years ago, and our background was in fact in business process redesign and development of skills capabilities to enable what was at the time the larger corporations like Nokia to implement and embed best practices within their organizations. And so that was the start of the business, and over the years we've been working with different technologies, but nowadays Softools is one of the most advanced web-based platforms on the planet. We work with some of the world's largest organizations. Coca-Cola is our flagship, but companies like IBM, GSK all use the Softools platform to embed best practices as defined by them. Sorry about that, guys. They're obviously just testing the fire alarm, and that wasn't a scheduled test at this end. So working with some of the world's largest organizations, public sector organizations like Sellafield, but over the 18 years, we've also been working with the small to medium-sized business market through our links here at Henley Business School. So we have a number of off-the-shelf applications and solutions which are targeted at specifically at the small to medium-sized market segment, as well as the larger organizations. But it's only recently, really, since the internet technology in the last 12 to 18 months has become mainstream, and we've got a situation now where corporate and public sector clients both adopt a cloud-first strategy, that it really gives us an opportunity to start to develop solutions for the medium-sized market space, and really that's what the Refresh program is all about. In terms of the business problem we're addressing, I think for every organization we go into, we see a common issue, and that is that the business has grown over time, but it's grown often without investment in the right systems or processes to enable it to survive and grow. And often what we see is literally hundreds of Excel-based applications being used to manage some of the most important processes within the client. And this applies just as much to Coca-Cola or a company like BP as it does to an SME. One of the case examples, stories that Bill will be talking about later will be Burton's Biscuits. Again, it's a mid-tier organization. It's about 400 million at this point in time. And we had a really interesting project with them in Q4 where we implemented the Refresh program. And it was really selectively using the applications and tools to address the gaps or the holes that they had in their business at the time that weren't being covered by effective systems. In terms of just some of the key facts for Softools, Softools is it's a zero-code application platform. And that means that we can build and deploy applications such as project management, risk management, and issues log, deal tracking very, very quickly, so often within hours, but certainly within a day or two, to address a particular client need. Now, within the Refresh program, there are in fact 9 applications off the shelf which are already configured and ready to go. But what we do find is that with most of our clients in all sizes and sectors, often they have very specific processes, and those can also be catered for very quickly and easily on the platform. So the zero code element gives us an enormous flexibility to develop those solutions. Other things which are, I think, interesting and relevant, again, some of the things you would expect with a modern web application. It does enable business processes. It does offer a great, easy-to-use user experience, which you often don't get in with software products 5 years old. The apps can be used anywhere, anytime. So, for example, applications used with a client around strategy or planning the implementation projects or setting KPIs, that will give you access to see your client's work anywhere, anytime, right the way through to the underlying hosting platform. We're a Microsoft partner, and we use the world's most secure and scalable hosting platform. May or may not be relevant to you, but we operate in all parts of the world. Most recent deployment was in a place called Wollongong in Australia. Again, all deployed on the platform. We've created over 1,000 applications in the last 12 months, covering everything from innovation, operational excellence, through to governance, risk and compliance. A mixture of corporate clients across all segments, but we work with a lot of small and medium-sized businesses as well, but they'd be less known in terms of brands. And pretty much across all sectors and all types of organization. But the key thing in this picture is that that's about us, but we don't go to market direct. We have always worked with strategic partners. Some of the larger organizations like KPMG, Turner & Townsend, Kempner Trigo are strategic partners of ours. But really to address the mid-tier market space, which we see as being massively exciting just at this point in time, again, our objective with the Refresh program is to work with a select number of associates who work with that particular market space. And that's really what Bill will come on and talk about later. And finally, again, the source of differentiation, what makes us different. In a way, I think it is that combination of applications. Historically, software applications would be sold individually, but to solve a business problem, typically we need 2 or 3 applications together. So, for example, a strategic change program such as Refresh would need to have a tool to capture the strategy, perhaps embed that in a series of KPIs. So a KPI application, we'd want to have change projects, so that would be a change application. And we'd also want to track, for example, the risks and ongoing issues log. So again, it's 4 or 5 applications working together, each reflecting best practice, but each of the best practices could be configured specifically for the client if need be. The ability to operate on a mobile phone or a device such as a tablet, again, is increasingly relevant for clients. But underlying it all, the client needs to have confidence that the platform that their data is being hosted on is secure and is scalable. And that's where Microsoft Azure, working with the world's best hosting platform, gives us great advantage. And in fact, we host European nuclear data on behalf of governments using the Azure platform. So that's just a quick 5 minutes in terms of background to Softools as a software business. But obviously the Refresh program is that combination of our underlying technology and applications, which we'll show later, and the expertise and facilitation, coaching, consulting of the independent associate. Before I hand back over to Bill, just to pick up on the Refresh program, any questions, guys? And Aaron, welcome to the call. I notice you've joined there, but any quick questions that we should cover off?
No, thanks.
Okay, great. Well, Bill, let me pass over to you.
Sure, thanks, Andy. So without further ado, a little bit more about the Refresh program itself, and I'll link it into an example that Andy has already mentioned to give it some flesh on the bones, as it were. But all this is about is achieving sustainable growth by applying a simple 4-stage process to improving performance of any kind of organization. So it doesn't matter what industry sector it is in or what size of organization we're talking about, but particularly it's useful to the small to medium-sized business. And I will talk through an example in just a second. So what are the stages we go through? Scan, blueprint, transform, control. What are all these about? Scan is really the umbrella question there. If we're dealing with a client, okay, what's happening in your business? What's happening in your business? So even before we know what's going on in their business, we actually have to do some preparation with that client. And just by way of example, and I'm sure this is the way that you would deal with your new prospects or current clients, there's preparation by going to talk with a member of the individual management team or the entire team itself. So in the case of Burton's Biscuits, we're still an ongoing project with them. They are halfway through the implementation of it at the moment as we speak. There was an extreme need to act quickly to formulate their strategy so they could get ready for implementation over the next few years. And I'm sure you've read about all the turmoil that's happening in the markets there with the Kraft Unilever is it on, is it off merger there? So there's huge consolidation happening in that industry. And now that Kraft and Unilever have decided to not proceed with that takeover, one of the next targets in the frame is Mondelez, and there's a connection there to Burton's Biscuits because they are one of the competitors that they deal with in that market space. So they were well aware of the fact that they needed to get ready very quickly in order to say what is our strategy and how we're going to implement it. And so they liked the idea that they could facilitate the process, give it some agility and speed by going through the 4-stage process. And that's articulated here. So the first session we did a classic strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, situation analysis with them to understand where they needed to pay attention and what areas they needed to focus on in terms of changing their business and what the strategic time frame for them made sense. So we spent time with the senior management team there going through that. Session 2 was going through the business blueprint. What does our strategic mission look like? What's the vision? What's our source of competitive advantage? What's our directional growth in terms of new products and markets that we're going to go after, those that we're not going to go after? And in terms of the product service propositions, what are those that make sense? What are those that we will not emphasize? What are the ones that are going to give us the leverage for growth? All of this usually takes obviously a lot of time and analysis. The beauty of doing it this way is that we could focus and complete the whole strategy within only a few weeks, which sometimes can take months. So the support provided by the framework we're suggesting here was a means to, I suppose, quicken the pace with which the formulation of that strategy could be done before we bridged into session 3, which is transforming the business there and saying, well, what are the projects we need to undertake? What are the processes, the core business processes that we need to underpin? Burton's Biscuits has a huge manufacturing competitive advantage in terms of its manufacturing facilities, particularly for the product range that they deal with. But there are other things that they need to do because of the changes in the market and trends in eating patterns and the kind of health priorities that's being imposed on consumer products companies. There are a number of innovations that they needed to consider in that whole portfolio they were putting together. So the transformation stage was very important. And now they're in the control stage of saying, okay, now we've agreed where we're going to go. These are the main work streams that we're going to look after. How do we action things through review processes, our key meetings, our strategic key KPIs to track progress? As we deal with issues, how are we monitoring the risks and issues and assumptions that we're coming across? And what's the communication plan? So they did a round robin of all their internal stakeholders first to alert them to the new strategy, but of course also the external community and their major stakeholder to get buy-in to the whole program. So the key point here, rather than going through all of that detail, is that in each of those sessions there are apps that underpin and gather the information needed in order to progress them to the next stage. And that's what we want to share with you. What are the apps that they would use to help them complete the scan, complete the blueprint, complete the transform, and complete the control?
Great. Okay, thanks, Bill. So let me pick up at this point in time. And this one I'm going to move from the PowerPoint, and we'll just go on to the live demonstration suite here. So I've now just clicked on the Business Refresh site, and this is the tool that Bill and, as you said, the associates will be using as they facilitated and coach Burton's Biscuits or any other client through the transformation program, what we call Business Refresh. First thing to say about the site is that it's running over the secure internet, as we said earlier, running on Microsoft Azure. And the system knows who each user is as they log in. And so initially, the associate or consultant would operate on the system under their own name. And perhaps during the initial 1 or 2 phases, all the work on the system would be done by the associate, capturing the information and presenting it back to the client team. But as we get into the implementation phase, so into sessions 3 and 4, it's then important that the site is then handed over to the client so they can then capture their projects, capture their KPIs, capture their risks, and then start to use it on a day-to-day basis. So effectively locking in the methodology into the client and providing that stickiness. And then ultimately, as you'll see later, that provides the basis on which then the consultant or associate would go back in on a quarterly basis or on an annual basis just to refresh that strategy and refresh the transformation program. The security settings determine what I can see. So it may be that one person or one team should only see certain projects and somebody else sees other projects. And the permissions determine what the user can do. So setting up security or setting up a new team or even building an application from scratch. Again, all that can be configured on the system based on permissions. The applications are all available in the top left-hand corner via what's called the springboard, and you'll see they're broken down into the 4 phases that Bill has just described. So in the scanning phase, we have a tool there for managing the SWOT, and that's a tool which would be used prior to the strategy session, but then the expectation would be that that will be updated on a quarterly basis. Then that would feed into the annual blueprint, and so this is really the business strategy. This is the blueprint for the business over the next 12 months, and that would be refreshed once a year. And so the initial workshop might be perhaps 4 days of activity, but then once a year there'll be 1 to 2 days just to refresh it and keep it current. And we'll have a look at the blueprint application shortly. Coming out of the blueprint, in order to implement the strategy, there are going to be 2 different areas. One is to specify the specific products and markets the company will do, but also what it will not do. And so this should manage and help to track new product development or new service development, but also perhaps offerings that the company has that they need to phase out or wind down. So that defines the product markets, but then also linked into that, we also need to implement a change plan. That maybe the company wants to then move into Europe, and that needs to be planned and that needs to be tracked and using the application there. Then once we've done that, so again, following on from the strategy in the final session, it's a question of translating the strategy into a series of key performance indicators. So the balanced scorecard for the organization as a whole. So on what basis will we judge and assess whether or not this strategy is actually happening? And that would be part of a monthly performance review process. So we can see here that as we go through the application, some would be used annually, such as the blueprint. Others will be used on a quarterly basis, such as the SWOT. The propositions and work plans would be based on a project basis. And then a lot of the governance elements would be updated and reviewed on a weekly, monthly basis. So effectively, is providing the routine or governance routines for the business on an ongoing basis. So KPIs would be a balanced scorecard. Performance planning, so this would then, based on the strategy, would identify the most important or critical people in that business and make sure that they've got clarity in terms of their role, in terms of their short, medium, and long-term objectives, but also in terms of their development actions. Performance review meetings, again, something that a lot of companies do very badly is that routine senior management team or board meeting every month and just tracking who's going to be there, what's the agenda, what were the outcomes. So that's the regular meetings, but it could also be the meetings which are around a special event, perhaps an innovation workshop, or perhaps a strategic review of certain competitors, but it's monitoring and tracking those key events in a single place. Pillars are really key stakeholders of the organization, and those could be key accounts. So for example, it could be key clients or key channel partners or key suppliers. Now, this isn't actually intended to be a CRM system. In our experience, most clients of any size have some kind of CRM system. So in fact, we do have something like 40 other applications available off the shelf. So if the client doesn't have a CRM, we can just pick one up and just put it in very quickly. But the thing that's typically done badly is the management of those key accounts, and that's what this tool enables us to do. The RAID register is an integrated risk and issues log. RAID actually stands for risks, actions to address critical issues, insights or lessons learned, and key decisions. And so you can imagine that at each of the PRMs, one of the things that would be reviewed would be the KPI dashboard. And wherever we've got a red or amber indicator on the dashboard, then we would need to capture a RAID item to capture what it is and what we're going to do about it. So those are the core applications, the core 9 applications that come out of the box for Refresh, but there are others also available. And selectively, as Bill was intimating, in fact, you take a company like Burton's Biscuits, they don't necessarily have gaps in all of those areas, but I think in 4 or 5 key areas, there are applications which would address key gaps that the client currently has, and helps to ensure that once the strategy is set, it actually happens. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns that a lot of SMEs give us, is that it's all very well setting the strategy, but how do we make sure we implement it with a degree of discipline? You'll see there are a couple of other applications in the bottom left corner here. One is the Knowledge Cube. This is based on work we did with Pearson, where we took general business knowledge around 9 different aspects of business management and commissioned the creation of useful information in each of those areas. So, for example, in marketing, in sales, in operations, in project management, in risk management, in general management, and so on. And in each area, we identified the glossary of terms, frequently asked questions, stories, white papers, and so on. And so that was working with Pearson, so one of the global book publishers. But again, that's an integral part of the Refresh platform that supports the associate as they work with different clients in different sectors. And last but not least, again, the idea is that we also look to have a lead referral system. So with our current partners and associates, again, often they're working with a client in one particular area, for example, risk management. They come across other opportunities which are outside their core capability. And so that's where we would pick that up and just introduce them to 1 or 2 of the other partners. And it's just a very easy, warm lead referral system. So these are the applications, and I'm just going to now delve down into 1 or 2 of them just to have a look at what they look like, and just to see a bit of variety. But obviously, this will be covered in more detail on a formal training program. But before I go into the detail, any quick thoughts, questions at this point in time?
It looks very interesting from my point of view. It starts off as a consultancy sale, then it turns into a software sale.
Yeah, I think so. But I think that's a really good question, because I think different clients can be managed in a different way. But I think the idea behind the tool is that it can be used as a very, very, very soft sell to a client. So effectively what it does in stage 1 is simply give the consultants methodology and tools that they may or may not be familiar with, but it also gives them an ability to stand out perhaps from the competition. So having a methodology and having a tool set helps them to get the business in the first place to then do that consulting work. But then some of the tools could be used during that initial client engagement at no cost to the client. But obviously there comes a point, and it's typically after the blueprint, after the strategy session and before we get into implementation, then that's the opportunity then to sell the solution onto the client in a very soft and easy way as part of the implementation program. So that's the idea, and then of course that then that's built into the DNA of the client, and so even if perhaps the executives change in the client environment, they can't actually switch their consultant, because you're the consultant that's actually supporting the client on that particular tool. So certainly that's the idea, and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about that later. So let's have a look at some of the tools then. I'm just going to start off. Let's start off with an easy one. It's the KPI scorecard. So coming out of the strategy, rather than it just being a document that sits on a shelf, how do we bring that to life? And in this example, we can see that this organization, and 100% of the information you see here on the Refresh site, this is all demo data, so there's no client data here at all. But you can see that here's a balanced scorecard. It's grouped classically by the Kaplan and Norton balanced scorecard classifications. But and this might be for the board or the highest level of the senior management team, but it could also be cascaded down to each of the different teams. So the first point is, that's the strategy. How are we going to know if it's happening and if it's correct? And we can see here that we've got specific KPIs. We can see where we are in terms of the current level of performance, and you'll see it's using the principles from good to great that says that there are a lot of very successful businesses out there, but often success inhibits their growth because there's no real burning platform. So we've got a 5-point scale here, but we can see on each of them, if I click on the chevron on the right-hand side, here we're looking for net profit. We can see how it's calculated. We can see what good looks like, but actually what our target is in terms of great. We can see also where we are in terms of current level, but also where our concern is that the current performance is getting worse, and therefore we have status red. And if we want to see more detail on that particular indicator, we can just click on the record, and that will take us down into the record itself, where we can then see for this organization, we can see all the classification data around what is the key performance indicator. We can see that this one is in fact being escalated, and in fact we can see this is dummy data here. This has been escalated. We can see how we measure this particular KPI on a 5-point scale. So that helps people to move beyond just a bland statement into a KPI that really is smart in terms of being measurable and specific. And then we can perhaps see the profile over the last 12 months. So you can imagine at a board meeting, we're not necessarily going to review all of the KPIs. We may have reviewed the financials in terms of the P&L. Let's now have a look at our strategic KPIs, and we can see this one is of specific concern. And we can see how the data itself has progressed over time, but in terms of target versus actual, and we can see that we've got the trend is now falling off. And obviously this is just dummy data. For more sophisticated clients, just for your information, information can either be put in manually or it can in fact be imported via CSV from any third-party system, but it can also be linked via APIs. So some of our more advanced clients now are looking to link applications and data in Softools with the internal systems. The other thing just to point out here is that each one of the applications has full help information in the form of the I button in the top right-hand corner, and this just explains what the application is and how we would actually complete each one of the forms. So the user doesn't have to be an expert, and in fact the consultant doesn't have to be an expert, but it just everything that they need to implement the tool and to get users up and running is all embedded within the system. Now that's a KPI tracker, and obviously we have different views of the data. So this is just a list of all the KPIs. If we cascade it up and down the business, we have an ability to embed metrics, so we can see how one metric at one level is broken out into other levels. But we also have an ability to then show that information in different charts and reports such as this. So these are just two examples, so we can see overall performance levels in different areas, and we can see perhaps our biggest areas of concern at this point would be staff turnover, capability matrix, and market share. And of course, with each of the KPIs, then wherever we've got a red or an amber indicator, it tells us that we have some concerns. And so each red or amber indicator, we would expect to see a linked RAID item that says, right, how are we going to track the actions to actually progress from the red and turn it back into a status green. So that's an example of an application. Let's just have a look at a couple more. So again, that's the KPI dashboard. Now, that would then often go alongside improvement plans, so the transformation program. So this could be an application that just tracks projects right across the business. So it could be new product development, marketing initiatives, so market expansion, new products, operational excellence. So a lot of clients are currently implementing Lean Six Sigma operational excellence programs, a strategic change, a supply chain optimization, and perhaps at that regular monthly review, again, we can see if we just click on any of the items, the legend items that will hide those, it may be that we're just going to review these specific projects at this particular meeting, so red and amber indicator. And we can see we've got two quick process improvements. We've got 3 new product development for this period, and we click on that item, it will take us down to the underlying record. Alternatively, we can have a look at what a lot of clients would call the hot sheet. So having facilitated the strategy itself, we translate that into KPIs that are then used on a monthly basis, and we then also look to capture and set the transformation program. We can see it here all on single sheet or a single screen. And the other thing you'll see as I move from one application to the next is that the important thing is they're all running on a single platform, so there's no need to sign back in. It's effectively the home in which all the business governance and all the business management can all happen, all through a collection of applications. The look and feel of the apps is always the same. The navigation is always the same. And of course, if it is used within the client, so the client has a license to use it and manage they govern their business internally, as the consultant, you would have the ability to log in, and you can then provide that level of ongoing or virtual coaching or consulting to the client. So we can see here that they've got a number of different initiatives. One is around the installation of an assembly line. We can see this is in business unit A and the operations side. We can see a status red. So again, we can just click on the record and that will take us into the detail. And within the detail, again, we can just see the process that's been followed in the capture, prioritization and tracking of each of the different projects. We can see here, in fact, there's 5 criteria in this case that are used to assess and prioritize each of the projects. The value of each of this project, how suitable it is given the current situation or strategy, at the acceptability to the key stakeholders, at the feasibility of implementation given time and resource constraints, and how long the benefits will endure for. So it's just a really simple 5 question model to give us an overall priority score. And of course, if we forget what those criteria actually mean, exactly as before, we just click on the information button. It gives us a nice, simple definition of each of those 5 different components. And we'll see how we use that on one of the charts in just a second. Underneath here, again, we have just a simple work plan schedule. The idea isn't to have a detailed work breakdown structure, but actually to use much more of an agile approach where we've just got a standard 5-step approach. We've got our target and our plan dates and our actual dates. We have a simple little Gantt chart. We have a resource requirements, and then we've got our performance monitoring. And you'll see here that we've got expected budget that's been allocated for this. So the transformation budget or the marketing budget or the operational improvement budget can be set on a portfolio level. And we have expected financial impact in terms of expected best and worst case scenario. And we find this is a really neat way of getting people to think differently about their projects and trying to put a financial value on them where that's possible. And ultimately, we can then capture the realized financial impact so that we can then contrast to what did we expect and what did we actually achieve. And likewise with the start and end date. And you'll see that some of this information will be entered manually, but others will be calculated using expressions or workflow. So again, just a simple example of an application. This is really a plan on a page. It's about 1.5 pages long. But it gives us an ability to monitor and review performance in a whole number of different ways. So the performance review meeting, it could be the chief executive, it could be the operations director, might start off with the hot sheet here in terms of the red, amber, green, but it may be we go straight to have a look at different views. So just to give an example of some of the views, the portfolio Gantt, we can see the start and end date of the initiatives with more information. We can drill down into the underlying record, but we can see here the red, amber, green status. We might have a portfolio bubble in terms of new ideas, so budget versus priority, and this might be at an early stage. So these are all the ideas coming out of strategy. Where do we start? Well, it might be those that are high priority, but perhaps low budget. Right, let's just get on with these, shall we? So again, we can zoom in. We can see more information. We can then go into each of the different projects by clicking on it. We're going to want to report on the overall return on investment and see on a month-to-month basis where are we making the investments, how does that translate in terms of overall budget or overall return. And then we can have a look at classic fields like the red, amber, green, the one we had a look at earlier on. But we can also see more sophisticated views. So using the best expected and worst case values on each of the projects, we can see that this particular transformation program is expected to give us perhaps a £1.8 million return, but it could be as high as 2.2, 2.3. But if we don't manage the projects effectively, it could be as low as perhaps 1.1, 1.2. So again, this is just a simple graphic that often gives a lot of insight that the client wouldn't normally have simply by tracking projects on something like an Excel spreadsheet. And just a couple of other quick examples, again, multiple reports put together on a single dashboard. And in this case, we're just using information from each of the different charts. We really just need to check the loading of this one. And then last but not least, we also have a different view here in terms of the geo chart. Let me just let's just go pop back into that one via the home page. Let me just bring that one up again. I think we just need to check what's happened with our dashboard there. Well, it seems to have kicked me out of the site just for a second. So let me just pause there. Let's just pop back to the pack, and let's just pick up on some of the slides and just summary of some of the key features. So we'll send this pack through after the call, but essentially we saw all of the key components there. We have the landing page, and the landing page sometimes is just a welcome screen, but obviously if that's deployed within a client, then the landing page can be set up to be specific for that client in terms of showing them performance data. And that could be a combination of KPIs, the project data, the skill profile of their people, and perhaps some of the strategic risks, for example. We have obviously the Springboard, and here we see the combination of either accessing it from a PC, a tablet, or a mobile device. The idea of the red, amber, green hot sheet with the, again, ability to see it on either device. And again, whilst not everybody's a mobile worker, what we are finding is that busy managers, busy executives like the idea of being able to view, review, and update records on the mobile phone. Perhaps they've got 10 minutes over a cup of coffee or 15 minutes on a train. That means they can be productive and they can just keep track of what's going on. And that would apply also for the consultant, just being able to log in and see how different clients are progressing. The idea of the input screen and also some of the output reports and charts, the idea of the in-app chart, so the KPI one that we looked at, and also the dashboard that we didn't quite look at. Behind the scenes, again, it's a very, very straightforward process for setting up new teams, new users, and managing that. But ideally, the client themselves would have that, would have trained administrators, and they would manage all the complexity themselves. And ultimately, just so you're aware, a number of you and a number of our associates are specialist consultants in different areas. And whilst Refresh has a number of generic off-the-shelf applications, often for each associate, we end up building one or two specific apps that are specific to their areas of the business. And again, we do that in what we call App Studio, which is our zero-code application build environment. So let me just pause there in terms of the technology before I hand back to Bill in terms of a typical engagement and implementation timescale. But any questions at this point in time?
Just a quick question. When the consultant goes into the company, do they facilitate meetings and record stuff on flip charts, or do they record them into the app in real time?
Well, we've seen it happen both ways. I think if you go back 3-4 years, I would say nearly always people would do the meetings on flip charts, white papers, or just taking notes, which would then be entered into the system afterwards. Mm-hmm. But I think this is one of the biggest changes we've seen in the last 12 months, is that the internet has fundamentally accelerated and changed in the last 12 months, which means that everything can now be done real time on the system. And so we're seeing people gradually switch over to real-time use. And in fact, let me see if I can give an example of that whilst we're talking. But either way, and it all depends. I think with something like a strategy session, then often it's easier and better to work offline on flip charts for sure, because it's a facilitated event and you don't want the technology to get in the way. But as soon as we start to capture, and in fact, during the strategy session, we might have a brainstorm in terms of the list of projects or a list of, and that might be an initial brainstorm. But as soon as that information is captured, it needs to go in the system. And then, of course, people can then plan their projects directly on the system. And you might be doing a project facilitation, for example. So let's say there are 10 strategic projects coming out of the strategic review. And I'm just going to go into another site here where we can show the real-time facilitation elements. And so I'm going to go into a rate. Then as you're facilitating that session, then the information can be put directly into the system. And that way, by people being engaged in that, then it's much easier for them to see and understand the system. It's just and this is an example where we see real data on the right-hand side here. And if I want to edit this now, I can just actually click on the edit button, and by clicking on the edit button, the whole report becomes configurable. So now, of course, we can go through this, so we can just click on any particular item here. So, for example, we've got here, just by clicking on that cell, and that has changed the underlying record. So it's very, very quick and very simple to update and progress those performance review meetings. But yes, so technology is now being used more and more in the meetings, but there are some meetings where you would tend to still do it on a flip chart.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else now before I hand back over to Bill? Great. Okay, Bill, back over to you.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks very much. Just want to spend a little while just here now talking about, well, how do you get the stuff done in terms of a deployment, and give you an appreciation of the timelines involved here. The first thing I should say immediately is that what you see before me is a typical client deployment, assuming that the client needs to have something built to meet a particular process need. Another example, for instance, I worked on recently was with part of the Pernod Ricard group with the marketing management team, a global team managing relationships with the sales and commercial interface between the trade and their promotional teams. And what we had to do was spend time putting together and understanding what their requirements were at a scoping workshop before we come up with a prototype of the app. Now, what we're talking about here then is a special customized app rather than an on-demand app. I should point out that Business Refresh is ready to go as it is, so the timeline is almost immediate. If you're worried about the fact that it shows there 6 weeks, actually it's if you wanted to use it, it's ready now, ready to go. If you sign up, it can be used. So we're talking about two types of app. One is an on-demand app, and that's really a situation where quite a lot of the business processes are covered already. They certainly are in the Refresh solution, but you might come across in your travels as an independent consultant with a particular client with a particular process that needs managing. So if their demand is, for instance, to build a risk management app that reflects entirely their stage process of managing risks within their organization, then we might get into this situation where we need to do each of these steps. So begin with, well, what's the statement of work here that we need to get involved in? What are the commercials in order to do that? Can we agree that there's a need to do this and get the POs and all the admin stuff signed off? Then the key bulk of it is having the configuration or scoping workshop to say, okay, what would that actually look like? And once that's been done, we're in a position really to say, how long will it take? So it depends on how complex that app is, what other needs sit within the deployment that aren't covered here in terms of, how many locations, how many languages are involved. And the beauty of the app setup is that a lot of this can be done actually quite swiftly. It's an agile project management, agile build situation based around a sprint process. So what we have here is a situation where we can go to release 1 of the prototype fairly swiftly at the end of week 2. So we're going to actually see what it looks like in action and get feedback from the sponsor and core user group as to whether that's applicable before you go to release 2 in the internal pilot stage, and get feedback again that will be validated by the organization before we get into the rollout stage, where it's actually onboarding users before going live with that as an organizational tool that will be used across the agreed body of users. So there are then performance reviews in terms of, well, how well is it being integrated and so forth. So we're talking about here a 6-week program to get from start to finish, or soup to nuts, in terms of that build process. It can be longer, as it says up there, 3 months if we're talking about a very complex app, but we're trying to keep things simple here. So the message for Business Refresh is that it's immediate. And this is really just another stream that you can follow where you encounter a client engagement that might require more analysis or the actual build of a custom app suite.
Great. Okay, thanks, Bill. So just a couple more slides then to cover off the financials and the value side for the client. Let me just skip through to the next slide if I can. What we call in the value model. So typical deployment for our associates over a period of time when working with a client, then obviously hopefully performance improves. And so the first thing we're looking to do with the tools is, can we help the client to get to their value faster? Now, often you can't accelerate a strategy session, but in fact, by having an effective mechanism for capturing the SWOT beforehand and for planning and driving implementation, we can in fact accelerate that implementation. But obviously the strategy is typically a facilitated event. So can we get there faster? Hopefully. Can we sustain use of a particular methodology? And often the picture we're given that once a consultant or trainer has been in with the client, they've, let's say, trained them on a particular methodology like failure mode and effect analysis. 6 months later, the question is, well, how much visible use is there of that particular skill or method? And often it's not a lot. And we see this with the best training companies in the world. So by locking that methodology into an application which people use on a day-to-day basis, it does help to sustain performance. But more importantly, it then allows people to learn from each other and to replicate solutions across an extended business. So, for example, an improvement idea in one part of the business perhaps could be used in 2 or 3 other parts of the business. So that replication becomes increasingly important. So each of the applications should allow us to get there faster, to sustain performance and consistent use of the approach, and then to extend the value the client gets through replication across the business. And then, of course, whilst there are 8 or 9 applications off the shelf, it doesn't mean to say that we use them all at once. As you go into a client, some clients will want to use certain apps, other clients will want to use other apps, but it gives the opportunity, wherever you see an Excel spreadsheet being used in the client, to then say, look, perhaps we've got an application for that, and if not, then let's build it in as another application over a period of 24 hours. Now, as I said earlier on, our route to market is totally through our partner and associates. We like working with subject matter experts across all parts of the value chain. The reason for that is that obviously is now although we understand business process and we're our consultants ourselves, we don't have the bandwidth, and our focus is on, and our role is to drive the technology platform to support the people in the field. So what do our partners look for? Well, one is, can we deliver enhanced client outcomes by ensuring they get better value and it lasts for longer? Getting solutions up and running quickly, and as Bill said, actually, if it's an off-the-shelf application for a new client, we could have them up and running by 5 o'clock tonight, and that would be no problem. But primarily what our associate partners are looking for is to earn software as a service or renewable revenue streams, not just based on a per diem basis. So it might be that there's still going to be that 4 or 5 days worth of professional services with the client or more, but it also means the software as a service means that when the consultant moves on to the next client or the next engagement, that there's still a revenue stream there that will come in. And for things like the refresh program, it's an annual, quarterly, monthly cycle, which effectively locks the consultant back in to go back in and to facilitate that refresh of the strategy on an ongoing basis. And that provides that stickiness, because effectively it's locked into the ways of working or the DNA of the client. We hear a lot of our partners talking about moving towards asset-based consulting, and when we ask them what does that mean, it means taking their methodology or the stuff that they do and actually turning it into an asset. So for a lot of our partners, we actually build bespoke applications for them based around their areas of specialism. For example, we've just started working with a gentleman who's a specialist in the GDPR, so the new data protection requirements, and he's looking for an application that just has that with a linked trade register. And of course the ability to differentiate. Again, it's a very competitive marketplace, and what we're looking to do with our associates is to find at that point of differentiation. Now, Christopher, you're obviously the soft sell to the client, and this is really what I think it's all about. It's locking in solutions for the client. And so what we've tried to do with the refresh program is to come up with just a simple standard package for the client, which will cover the initial setup, the initial administrator training, the initial applications, plus an initial 3-month use. So it's a very low cost point of entry just to get them in, up and running very, very quickly, and then to have a £20 per user per month price point on an ongoing basis. So that's the commercial model really for all of our clients. And within those numbers, then we tend to split the revenues just on a 50-50 basis with our consulting partner. So the idea is to use it on a soft sell basis, potentially with the client initially, but then during that phase to then have a commercial lead behind with a client, which will then be locked in for the next 5 years or so. And in terms of how we work with associates, we work on a basis that we don't look to make any money out of developing partner associate capabilities. So what Bill's put together here is just a program that effectively at cost then enables you to have that capability to go out and work with different clients. And so we have an annual fee here of £500. And that covers an initial one-day event, which Bill and the team run here at Henley Business School. And that covers not only use of the software, but it goes through each of the applications at a slower rate, slows the pace down, and then gives an opportunity to really get inside that, gives access to all of the Knowledge Cube materials. But it will also set up a refresh site with a dedicated login, so you have your own site which you can then use on an ongoing basis with clients. The expert resources area, which is built into the refresh site, but only accessible to the associates. The networking and lead sharing, again, that tends to be, that can work very well, but it doesn't, but that's something we want to work on, but it's not the primary purpose of the network, but certainly we have a lot of referrals going on between partners and associates. And then ultimately, of course, the real interest is working with clients and starting to work with the 100,000 plus SME clients that are out there in the UK at the moment. So those are the two commercial models. Let me just, in the interest of time, let me just pass back over to Bill just to really talk about next steps and then just to see where we go from there.
Thanks, Andy. So bridging now to, yes, what's in it for you? Would you be interested in doing what Andy has just described? Those one-day induction events, assuming that you want to proceed. The dates are shown there. The first one is on Tuesday, the 4th of April. The second one on Tuesday, the 2nd of May. And obviously that equips you in detail to actually understand the toolkit, know how it all works, be confident to actually use it yourself and deploy it within a client. there is actually something isn't shown there. You might have seen on our website, which is actually the face-to-face session here at Henley on the 14th, which is a more detailed look, but here at Henley, for those who want to know a little bit more what we've covered here on the webinar. So that's a face-to-face briefing demo session. The actual Refresh induction course is the final event, assuming that you want to sign on for being an associate. That's the final bit that allows you to do that, and there's a contract that supports that in terms of being able then to use it with your clients. The support, I guess, then looks at how you might deploy that on-demand solution and actually be able to, with support, counsel and guide a client if they wanted to build their own solution themselves beyond the Refresh solution. So those are the options for you. We recommend highly then, obviously, what you've done already, which is to get aware through the webinar. If you want more information, please come to the learning event on the 14th of March. And if you're even more committed, how about, yes, signing on and becoming an associate, and then you get the power to use all of those tools to support your business. So that's where we're at the moment. Do you have any questions about anything that we have covered here at all? I appreciate there's an awful lot of information we shared, but are there some key questions that you would like answered before we kind of move to the next stage? A lot to think about. We will obviously send some follow-up information to you all. The other information I think you've probably already seen is on the website, Softools website, under the Solutions and the Refresh program. But is there anything that we haven't covered from your individual perspective here, the three of you there, that you would like to quickly address? Because we're just slightly over time, aren't we?
Just a quick question. Do you have any employed consultants yourself, or are you just a technology company?
We are a pure technology company now, and we have several consultants who are fully employed in Softools, but that's not our business model in terms of employed consultants. We do use contract resource on engagements on major engagements with clients where we're directly involved, and then we have our associate network of partners who are both large consulting companies or mid-tier consulting companies and specialist associates.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, well, look, really appreciate your time this morning. Let me suggest we close this particular call now, and Bill will follow up with a couple of pieces of information. One is going to be the PowerPoint pack and probably a PDF version of the Refresh flyer. And let me suggest if there are other questions that you've got at all, then perhaps just arrange a one-on-one call directly with Bill, and we can answer any questions you've got there. But certainly we'd be very interested in progressing and working with you all on this particular program. And I think the key thing for us is, again, we've tried to set it up so that to dip your toe in the water and actually make a start, it's effectively just a very easy, low-cost decision if it's relevant and of interest to you. But thanks very much for this morning, and hopefully we'll speak to you soon.
Yes, thank you very much indeed for your time, and look forward to keeping in touch with you via LinkedIn or email as the next step.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.